In 1787, I'm told our founding fathers did agree to write a list of principles for keeping people free. The USA was just starting out a whole brand new country, and so our people spelled it out, the things that we should be.
So I noticed that lately I have been mentioning a few times the situation with the Mayflower Compact and the American experiment into communism. And I thought that since I was mentioning it a lot, it might be a good idea to kind of lay it out and give a more full story, because I was mentioning it in passing amongst other topics. And so I kind of thought a focused explanation of what I was referring to is in order. It was called for. So that's what this is. This is a discussion of the experiment in communism in the American colony in Plymouth in Massachusetts. When the colonists, or the Pilgrims, left Europe in 1620, they were not the first to attempt to settle an American colony. They were, in fact, you could say, the third. The first one was the Lost Colony in Roanoke, and that is a group of settlers that attempted to settle in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Now, that colony eventually, that's why it's called Lost, disappeared. All the colonists disappeared. Either they all died of, starvation and plague and things like that, or they assimilated into the Native American cultures that were nearby, near their settlement, or perhaps they were killed by the Native Americans. No one really knows, but those are the three potential reasons for its disappearance. But that was the first colony that was attempted, and it failed because they disappeared. The second attempt was the Jamestown colony in Virginia. And that colony was founded much the same way that the Lost Colony of Roanoke was. It was founded to be a business venture. From the beginning, from the get-go, it was intended to be a profitable endeavor. And so from the get-go, it was very much so a capitalist system and a capitalist society. Jamestown had just started around 1620 to become a profitable endeavor. And you can say that it was the influx of slave labor that allowed Jamestown to begin to be profitable. But either way, Jamestown was founded with the intention of making money. It wasn't any sort of a religious statement. It was people going there purely for the intention of bettering their life and having a chance at riches, the riches of the New World. Remember, in 1607, when people started to colonize Jamestown, the only thing that Europe really knew about the New World was the stories of the Spanish conquistadores. So because the assumption was that the whole of the New World was filled with gold and riches, the people who initially went to Jamestown assumed that they would come into contact with these riches themselves. They did, but in a slightly different way, because they came into it through the crops that they raised. Pilgrims in 1620, they came over for an entirely different reason. It was not with the intention of making money. It was the intention of creating a perfect utopian society where they would be free to practice their religion. They were separatists. They were separating from the established religions in Europe at the time. They were an offshoot of the Protestant religions of the time, and they called themselves Puritans, meaning they wanted to practice the religion in a pure form. To create a place where they could do that, where they could practice their religion separately, purely as Puritans. That's why they're called the Puritans or the Pilgrims. Now, the Pilgrims, on their way over to the New World, on their ship, the Mayflower, they came up with a system by which they were going to govern their colony. And they called this the Mayflower Compact, because it's the agreement that they made on their way over on the ship. And in the Mayflower Compact, the Pilgrims attempted a communal living environment, a communal society. It established their government and the laws for their new colony, and they initially tried to live communally, putting all crops into a common storehouse and dividing them equally amongst the families. It was along the lines of each to their own ability, and they would receive according to their need. What is that? That's exactly what it says in the Communist Manifesto. It was clear from the Mayflower Compact that religious persecution was not the only thing that the Puritans were turning their back on. They were also turning their backs on the materialism of the old world and looking to create something better in the new world. And so the Plymouth colony was initially supposed to be a collectivist utopia, to create a world built on religious devotion as well as a new foundation of communal sharing and social altruism. All would work and share in common, knowing that neither private property nor self-interest would be a part of the fabric of their society. I found that while all of the colonists worked and contributed to this commune, to this utopia, they really didn't bring forth any of the bounty that they really needed from their efforts in order to make it a self-sustaining colony, a colony that no longer needed to worry about an influx of goods from the old world. And we know this because we have the diary of Governor William Bradford, who was in charge of the colony, and he said it outright. The less industrious members of the colony came late to work in their fields and were slow and easy in their labors. Knowing that they and their families were to receive an equal share of whatever was harvested, there was no incentive to work. Straight from Governor Bradford's diary, for the young men that were able and fit for labor and service did repine that they should spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children without recompense. The strong or men of parts had no more division of food, clothes, etc., than he that was weak and not able to do a quarter the other could. This was thought injustice. The aged and graver men to be ranked and equalized in labor and food, clothes, etc., with the meaner and younger sort, thought it some indignant and disrespect unto them, and for the men's wives to be commanded to do service for other men, as dressing their meat, washing their clothes, they deemed it a kind of slavery, neither could husbands brook it. In other words, they couldn't take it. As the resentment grew, everybody's equal share became smaller and smaller, and it got to the point that it wouldn't be enough to prevent starvation, death, all the horrible things that were afflicting the colony in its early years, in its growing pains. And the 2 years of this socialist system had left alive only a fraction of the original number of the Plymouth colonists. They were depleting rapidly. Realizing that another season like those they had had would mean the extinction of the entire community, the elders of the colony decided to try something radically different: the introduction of private property and the right of the individual families to keep the fruits of their own labors. Again, from Governor Bradford, and so assign to every family a parcel of land according to the proportion of their number for that end. This had a very good success, for it made all hands very industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been by any means the governor or any other could use, and saved him a great deal of trouble, and gave far better content. The women now went willingly into the field and took their little ones with them to set corn, which before would allege weakness and inability, whom to have compelled would have been thought great tyranny and oppression. Governor Bradford: by this time harvest was come, and instead of famine, now God gave them plenty, and the face of things was changed, to the rejoicing of the hearts of many, for which they blessed God. And the effect of their planting was well seen, for all had, one way or other, pretty well to bring the year about, and some of the abler sort and more industrious had to spare and sell to others, so as any general want or famine hath not been amongst them since to this day. So ironically, the Native Americans are given an awful lot of credit for saving the Pilgrims and the Plymouth colony, and although they didn't necessarily save it overall, they certainly did save it in the years that there was no harvest and the colonists would have starved. But in the bigger picture, it was eliminating communism that really truly saved the colony overall and kept it going. definitely a lesson, and one that was hard taught. But again, from Governor Bradford, the experience that was had in this common course and condition tried sundry years, and that amongst the godly and sober men may well convince of the vanity and conceit of Plato's and other ancients, that the taking away of property and bringing into a common wealth would make them happy and flourishing, as if they were wiser than God. For this community, so far as it was found to breed confusion and discontent, and retard much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. And I think the most significant part of this is that this was a group of people incented to make it work. They wanted this. They came over on the Mayflower with the intention of creating this exact society. And it still didn't work. And it still failed. Because even though they did have the desire to make this work, it just wasn't in human nature to work. And the Pilgrims, they weren't bothered by the fact that they had to change this. They considered it part of their learning curve, right? They had to figure this out on their own and see it fail before they could believe it. And once they did, they realized that it's the reality of man's nature. If he is to prosper, he has to have his own personal intrinsic incentives. Can't be just working for the common good. Now, if you ask me, the story of the failed commune in the United States is huge. And it's something that should be taught to every American school child. But it's something that rarely is. It's very rare that you will hear it discussed. Look in any, high school history textbook and see if you find it. You'll find the Mayflower Compact. It won't tell you what it attempted to do, and more importantly, that attempt failed. I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. I look forward to reading your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a great day, filled with love, laughter, and of course, dancing.
Dancing in